No one at all. Under the stars, the sun, the moon. And my heart's been set afire. I burned it all because of you.
Welcome to the Apocalist Book Club. I'm Nella, and I am once again here with the hosts of Binge O'Clock. We had so much fun with the first two zombie movies. We decided to keep this movie party going and continue with Day of the Dead. But before I get too far, if you two could introduce yourselves again.
I'm Joy Selden.
And I'm Danielle Na.
I keep wanting to say, and I've seen almost everything. It's so ridiculous. It's so Pavlovian at this point.
I paused for the split second to see whether you were going to continue before saying my name.
But yes, we are the hosts of Binge O'Clock, where we watch something and then we talk about it, and that's the pitch.
And I'm very grateful you both could join me again to watch the third movie, because I had a lot of fun with the first two. And boy, is there a lot to talk about this last one, because, where to even begin? First off, let's go with, would you recommend it? Since that's the classic Apocalypse way of beginning anything, really. Would you recommend Day of the Dead?
I would, for sure. What's interesting for me is I had kind of forgotten about this movie. I'm sure I've seen bits and pieces of it. I feel like I've seen the end of it way more than I've seen the beginning. One of those, you catch it late at night and you keep watching. And I had forgotten how much I really enjoyed it. And I actually think I like it more than the other two. Night of the Living Dead is, of course, a classic. And Dawn of the Dead is goofy and interesting in terms of camp and all these other aspects. But I really enjoyed Day of the Dead, a lot.
I agree. I don't know what this says about me, but this is for sure my favorite of the three.
I don't know if it's my favorite, but it is really good. It really holds up. It is dour. It is grim as all get all.
This is why Danielle and I liked it.
I was going to say, I like a dour, grim movie. So I think that's part of why I like this. I was also careful to say my favorite of the three because I have just seen so few zombie movies generally. So I can't compare it to everything else out there.
Just between the three movies we've seen, they were all from George Romero. I think this one really does hold up and is really well done, even though, boy howdy, did it really get pared down. And I have to say, I'm really grateful it was because his original concept was a little too out there.
Out there than Spaghetti Monster?
But they never actually got around to Spaghetti Monster, though. They never got around to it. And also, I do want to take a moment to apologize to the listeners. I am actually sick with COVID. That will explain why I am particularly nasally and sounding particularly of Long Island right now. So hopefully we can get through this episode and it won't be too painful for anyone involved.
My vote, personally, is just lean in terms of the accent. What if we just had Long Island Nella?
Yeah, here's the problem.
What if we just had coffee talk? What if we just did?
You say that, but the problem is my nose is just getting enough on the stuffy side that it's going to happen. And you're going to be like, where did this come from? You joke, but we will hit a moment in this podcast, and it won't be Ronkonkoma.
Miami.
Oh, my God. Yeah, you're right. It is going to be Miami. All right, anyway. Don't jinx it.
I would like to, before you begin with the Romero opus that this was supposed to be, I wanted to just mention that I watched a little bit behind the scenes of a 40-minute behind the scenes thing that I managed to find. And it opens with Romero, and I'm going to butcher the quote, so I apologize. But it opens with Romero talking about how, there are fans of Night of the Living Dead of it's a classic, don't touch it. This is all we've watched, and they're happy with that. And then there are fans of Dawn of the Dead who are we're here for a fun little romp and an adventure. And then there are the trolls who like Day of the Dead. And I was like, no lies detected.
No, I saw that exact quote is actually in the behind the scenes book.
Yes.
Because Day of the Dead was panned. It wasn't as popular. It didn't have as good reviews as the second one. And Night of the Living Dead was given bad reviews as well, though it became a classic pretty quickly. But it is funny to see how Day of the Dead was received, because it is a very dour, very serious movie in a lot of ways, especially when you compare it to 10 years before. We had Dawn of the Dead, which was a little on the side of camp.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get too into it, I do want to begin the section where we contextualize, because that's our bread and butter here on the Apocalist. Before Day of the Dead, Romero was working on movies like Knight Rider and Creepshow. And by the way, like, Stephen King wrote Creepshow. And Romero had been in talks to adapt Stephen King's Salem's Lot, but it ended up getting dragged out and ended up going ahead later without him involved. So he's making a name for himself in these sort of like Knight Rider was his passion project, and that was a weird one, but he still believes like it holds up and he really loves it. Creepshow was pretty popular, made a lot of money. It kind of got panned by people who were like, oh, well, that's not real horror. You could do better. But like, they had fun doing it, and it brought in money. And Creepshow is more of like a horror anthology kind of thing. Because of the box office success of Creepshow, Romero was able to conceive what he felt would be his greatest of the Dead movies, his Gone with the Wind of zombie films. And I'm a little bit
I'm still not over that phrase.
I cannot, and I will get into it, because I think you need to understand how immense his vision for this movie was originally, because we lucked out. By being forced to cut it down, it made it a not terrible movie. And I stand by that statement. I am sorry, George. I love your passion. It would have been awful. It would have been too much.
Okay, tell me what it was, because
right.
I have to understand what a person would be thinking to tee themselves up in exactly that way.
So let me paint you a picture. So here we have George, and he goes, I suddenly got this conceit. Maybe I'll do one of these movies every 10 years and really reflect a little bit of what's going on. And Day of the Dead, he says, really grew out of that 80s feeling of giving up on everything. The government, the military, your faith in financial systems, just like that 80s, like the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. Reaganomics is terrible.
The Reaganomics is destroying the country. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it very much came out of that idea. Now, mind you, he once had a more direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead, which was that you're more following the surviving zombies. And that original sequel was that the surviving zombies kind of find some weapons accidentally, and they start remembering how to use the weapons. And then this leads to an army of zombies chasing a solitary wounded human. And then that human reaches the farmhouse and dies when zombies drill him full of holes. And then this would have led to what his working title for this was Anubis, where
I wish you could see Danielle's face.
For that one, it ends with an army of zombies controlled by human masters. And he was making this big allegory about dealing with the consequences of an incoming revolutionary society represented by zombies who replace an existing social order of humans. And the moral being that nothing really changes at all. Now,
I have some interesting news for you, because the next movie picks up some of that he left on the cutting room floor.
Yeah. Now, and I also feel, honestly, I do feel that some of that does show up in Dawn of the Dead. Mm-hmm. Because I think in Dawn of the Dead, we see the failure of 1960s ideals and this movement towards conformity and consumerism on the part of the younger generation. I think you can even read a bit of COVID into Dawn of the Dead. And I'm not even sitting here being like, because I have COVID and now everything's going to be the COVID channel. Because there is something about, we are in the middle of something terrible that is happening, but we feel drawn to the things that give us comfort, even if we're shambling dead and we were going to make everything worse. We got to go to those small sales. We have to go out to eat. Anyway, so by 78, he sort of expanded his vision of Anubis with this army of the dead by writing this 40-page treatment.
Every time you say Anubis, Danielle is just like, it's like the sparkle in her eyes dies a little bit every time you say it.
And then
that's a really good way to describe it. And then I just kind of gently shake my head.
Right.
Because it's...
Yeah. So then we end up, hear me out. We end up with a 204-page screenplay.
Yes, it was massive. The special effects team who got a hold of this phone book were like amazed, and they were like, we're going to have so much fun. We're going to take care, like, we're going to do, like, there's the prosthetics are off the chain. We're going to have like armies of different, aspects of zombies. They were so excited to work on this monster.
Yeah. This would have required a $7 million budget. Question. Yes.
How many pages was it?
204.
For context, my ignorant question is, how long is a usual movie script?
Okay, so in movie terms, a movie script tends to be approximately a minute per page. So this would have been...
Oh, boy.
This 2 or 3-parter.
Ooh.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of screenwriting, this is a beast. And
okay.
Oh boy. All right. Let me try to explain to you the original plot of Day of the Dead.
Can't wait.
A 3 hour and 15-minute movie.
Okay. It would have been about 5 years after the zombie plague. And actually some things did survive in the movie that actually got made. Like the shots of the alligator crawling on an abandoned bank, useless money bills littering the floor, the decaying zombie with the missing jaw, the symbolism of detritus and the decay of a vanished civilization. Earlier versions had a boatload of human refugees searching for sanctuary and like arriving at a city marina in Florida. And these characters are Sarah, Miguel, Tony, Chico, and Maria. So instantly we have a party of presumed to be Latinx characters, like looking to find survival in Florida. And they have to flee the marina and they escape to a tropical island. One of them gets bit. His arm gets sliced off. That also makes it into the movie, but like in a different configuration. Mm-hmm. They end up, so much happens, but they end up on this island. And the island is where there's a huge elevator of an underground military installation. And this is where we meet Captain Rhodes, who also makes it to the movie that was made. Mm-hmm. But it turns out they are in control of a band of uniformed zombies wearing red vests. They have a zombie army.
Hilarious.
Yes. And the reason they can control their zombie army is because they are feeding their zombies with human meat from refrigerated cartons. Where do they get the meat from, you might ask? Good question. Because Sarah escapes and is rescued by a Caribbean islander, John, and his alcoholic mechanic friend, Bill McDermott. Okay, so these characters made it over to the movie as well. The island represents a gross parody of capitalism and is divided into 3 class sectors. In the lower level, there is the lumpen proletariat. This includes not only humans who relish violence, depraved sex, drugs, and disease, but also others regarded as disposable units of society, such as blacks like John, the Irish like McDermott, and dissidents like Dr. Logan. Also, a disabled female deaf-mute named Spider. I am quoting this from, this is the description used. Completely understand that there are better terms to use for this, but yes, there is a lot going on. Stalag 17 is made up of what appears to be a cesspool of human dregs, while some individuals, like Spider, are allowed to perform menial tasks on the other levels. The vast majority are regarded as little better than human fodder for the zombies. So we've pretty much got the greatest hits of apocalypses where it's like, oh, we use the poor to feed the war machine. They're just fodder. Literally being fed to zombies.
But they killed and froze the poor?
Yeah. So as the poor, I guess, die or killed, they are used. And also, the other thing is that, Rhodes uses violence and murder to control this poor population and this disadvantaged population. And anyone is killed is fed to zombies. and
I love that point is different. I love that we changed the fundamental level of Rhodes, and we'll get into the actual plot of what we ended up seeing.
Rhodes is still terrible.
What made it over is that he uses violence to control the people around him, right? But not... Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I have to share with you the fact that I don't know what it was about your tone of like he uses violence as control, but I was like instantly thinking of a Pokemon match.
Oh my god.
And I was like, Rhodes uses violence. It's super effective.
Very effective. Sure. Okay. That's not all, folks, because the next level comprises of the underground scientific establishment. And this is where you get the scientists. And it's these are different characters, but there's a woman scientist and another woman assistant and I guess a man. And they're trying to study zombie behavior. This is going to be a big yikes. There are actually 3 star zombie pupils, Bluto, a former American Indian called Tonto, and Bub. And I'm just like, why did we have to do that? Thank God this didn't become a movie, because wow. Do not like at all. Like his later counterpart in the movie that was actually made, Bub is the most advanced of them all, and he develops these deep feelings for Mary like a son towards a mother. So the script says.
Of course they named her Mary.
Anyway, there's also this grotesque parody of Reagan-era lifestyles from the midsection of this massive script where former Florida Governor Henry Dickerson controls the island society. He lives in affluent luxury. It's an escapist world that's like a parody of Dallas and Dynasty and Falcon Crest. Like, he has a harem, and it's like a good old boys country club with cronies and political yes men.
He has a harem?
Yeah.
Where does he get the harem?
Well, because there's all like the wives left over from like the good old days, and all like the mistresses, they all make it. Yeah, so there's that.
Okay.
And he has like these big grandiose like dreams of taking America over again and like recruiting millions of zombies into his zombie army so that he's the ruler of America. And so like he's like this bizarre version of Reaganite militarism, even like Star Wars philosophy, as in like the rocket like missile nonsense, not like the movies. So anyway, Sarah eventually joins forces with the other people trapped in the lower levels to rebel. Dr. Logan, who is like banana pants, wishes to destroy the entire island like a biblical Jehovah. Like there's this argument that like, but there are other innocent people here. They don't deserve to die. Like they're trapped in below, and it's the guys on top that need to go, not everyone. The zombies riot and they try to find their own food. They consume the scientist and Dickerson's affluent community. The island explodes, but then a group of survivors, including John and Sarah and other people, escape with like a bunch of children. And the movie actually ends suggesting that the zombie plague is now over because somebody who dies doesn't reanimate. So there's now hope that humanity can now actually survive in this new world now that we've wiped the slate clean. The end.
How have we, the people on this one island, wiped the slate clean?
Well, we blew it up. We blew it all up.
The one island, though. What about the rest of the world?
No, I know. No, shh. Shh. It's
I can't wait until you see some of these themes return for Land of the Dead, which now we have to watch.
Okay,
because,
now we have to.
Now we have to watch Land of the Dead. But like, what's interesting to me is like
Land of the Dead. I'm very open to watching Land of the Dead.
It's well, actually, now that I've properly watched Day of the Dead all the way through, I don't know if it will unseat this as my favorite one. But way back, like before I actually remembered these other 3 movies, Land of the Dead was actually my favorite. So we'll see if that still rings true. But what I find interesting is like he wrote this phone book of a script. Was that all of it? I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt that.
That is me speed running through it.
Yeah, no, I know.
There's a lot going on.
That was his Gone with the Wind.
That was his Gone with. This was his magnum opus. And what happened was they started like they sent around this giant script. All the special effects dudes are like super excited because it's like there's above ground, there's below ground, we're trying to figure all this out. It's going to be really cool. We're going to have a lot of layers and we're going to have a lot of levels. And like the producers are like trying to make it happen, and they sort of quote unquote move forward with the idea of this gigantic script in tow. And then, you know, they get the bad news of like, the numbers just aren't working. We won't have the numbers to make this script. And like Romero
like
gets
the money, budget?
The budget. I think Nella, I think you have the numbers. Doesn't it end up being like a third of the budget he needs?
Yeah, they massively cut it. Massively. And he really had to pare down, and you'll when we get to it, you'll see like they really pared down what happens within it. Look, I think what happened is he got too buddy-buddy with Stephen King and went, hey, wanna know what's great? The Stand. What if I made, like, The Stand but zombies? Something too long with a lot going on.
The idea of a zombie movie that is the length of, like, one of the Lord of the Rings movies is bonkers to me. And I'm, like, trying...
You know, and yet nowadays we have Army of the Dead. So, really, we've come full circle.
It's like he had missed his moment of like, you know, he had been born just slightly too early. Like, had he been directing stuff into, you know, continuing in the aughts and the teens and the 20s, maybe he could have accomplished this. You know, this is like this I mean, you couldn't have made King Kong back then,
yes,
but you did
hear
it now.
you, but also not this movie.
I know,
not that movie.
But then Zack Snyder picked up the metal and went, "Here, you drop this, King."
Yeah, exactly. And he ran with it. But the thing that I especially love is in and I don't know if you saw this in your notes, Nella, but a part of that behind the scenes thing was they were also talking about like, when we told him we had to cut the budget, Romero, like, basically went home and wrote the angry version. Like, we got the angry cut. We definitely got the angry cut of what this movie was supposed to be. This is the angry cut? Yes.
I believe it.
I love it.
I 100% believe this is the angry. This is the Suicide Squad of James Gunn. This is the angry version.
I'm annoyed that this all came about because of numbers, mostly because in my heart of hearts, I love the idea of someone sitting him down, someone who knows him and loves him as a friend, sitting him down and saying, hey, listen, buddy, this isn't the one.
Yeah, this is not your moment.
You know?
Hold on to some of these ideas. Some of them are really great, though maybe we can do them later, but...
Yes, because I think the movie that came out the other side was just so much better.
I mean,
for lack of a better term. It's a better movie.
There's a really great quote from Romero where he sort of looks back and says, despite the budgetary setbacks, it's about one of not necessarily the last, but one of probably several nests of humanity that are left. As a military group, they were there for research, and of course, now the need for what they were doing is all but gone. With society gone, who are they going to report to if they find anything out? All of a sudden, when that structure is gone, they don't quite know how to behave, or they cling to old behaviors and no one talks to each other and no one communicates. So there's this sort of tragedy about how a lack of human communication causes chaos and collapse, even in this small little pie slice of society. And
yes.
And the fact that he's able to finally distill this magnum opus down to a breakdown in communication destroys humanity.
Yes.
Is super effective.
Yeah.
Super effective, because compared to that, I mean, this movie was basically a bottle episode, but it was a super effective bottle episode.
Exactly.
Yeah. It is able to portray all of that in every single moment of the film. And that's exactly how it felt while I was watching it. It felt like this is an outpost in the middle of nowhere that hasn't had contact, that doesn't know what they're doing, that is just operating on an outdated, we had to, you know, this facility wasn't built for this. We weren't supposed to be here this long, blah, blah, blah. Like all this stuff that it's just like, we are operating under the assumption that other things will happen to you know, spurn this on. And it's like, no one's there. No one's coming. The radio, we keep calling. No one's on the radio. We keep going out looking for survivors. No one's there. Or they're in other bunkers like this, or they're, you know, holed up in the middle of nowhere somewhere. We're not going to find more people. We have no structure. And the breakdown of that and the breakdown of the industrial military complex in this microcosm was really interesting and super toxic, but really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, also, I just got a shout out. So Tom Savini got his breakthrough work in makeup and practical effects on Martin, which was the vampire movie Romero made. And so then he was given to so then he was brought on to work on Dawn of the Dead. And then he's brought on again on Day of the Dead. And like in that documentary, I walked in on you in the one part where he was working on the guy who plays Steel. And he talks about how, we had a lot of blue in Dawn of the Dead, but now we're keeping them to the back. We're really trying to go for more realistic, like, zombie makeup. And, like, there was an interview with a guy playing a zombie and talking about, like, yeah, I'm more of, like, this grade zombie, and, like, I played this grade zombie before, and, there are different stages of zombie. And, like, all these interviews happening in this, like, big, the set for this is amazing, because it was an actual giant limestone mine located in Pennsylvania that was used to, like, store, like, records and other things that need to be kept at a certain climate and humidity control. And so it was, like, always, like, 55 degrees in there. It actually made a lot of people really sick because it was 55 degrees and it was so humid it actually, like, messed with their equipment.
Oh.
And you didn't see the sunlight, and there was a doctor.
It was so remote, they had to bust them in. And all these people got were like $1 a day and like a hat that said I was a Romero zombie. And, there's this great quote from Tom Savini of, when you're born in Pittsburgh, one of the things you want to be when you grow up is a zombie in a George Romero movie. Which is so funny because when they went down to Florida to Fort Myers to actually film like the outdoor scene, because it takes place in Florida, when they're down there and they did the cast call, they wanted like a group of 800 people, which they easily could have gotten in Pittsburgh. But like maybe like 40 people tops made the call and no one had their heart into it. And they were like, people in Pittsburgh are so much better. Like they would understand. They know what being a zombie is.
Yeah, there was a lot of like people giggling and a lot of people like quote unquote not taking it seriously. And I was like, oh, Romero, I'm sorry.
Meanwhile, like spoilers, but it's just like maybe you should go do a casting call for Return of the Living Dead, but we'll get to that. Anyway, so in this cast, let me just do a quick the cast of characters. We open with Dr. Sarah Bowman, who's played by Laurie Cardle, and Sarah is a really fascinating character. She's a very 80s powerful, like active science woman.
Super brave.
Yeah, precisely. And, I really like this quote where she felt grateful for the part of the way it was written. And she says, Romero could have made me this sexy little twit bouncing around with a gun, but he made her intelligent and strong. In fact, whenever I would try to make her a little more emotional, he wouldn't allow me to do that. And, like, she does say that she's still an exaggerated woman of the 80s, and even Romero admits, I think I was still partially apologizing for the first film where Barbara was just Jell-O. Although, again, justice for Barbara,
the
because
realism.
Because, sometimes people turn to Jell-O when things happen. I just,
Yeah.
But I get it. I get, everyone... I get the criticism.
We need the Jell-O representation.
I get it, and I get the idea. I get the idea of Sarah not letting anyone else see her do that.
Yeah.
Right?
This is
like in my head canon, Sarah turns to Jell-O frequently. We just don't get to see it because no one else does.
So we have Sarah, we have her lover, and one of the army men, Miguel, and he is having a massive breakdown because, things aren't great. And he's only human. Then we have Captain Henry Rhodes, who commands Private Steele, Private Rickles. They're the worst. We have John, who's the flyboy. He's the helicopter pilot. He's Jamaican. We have Bill McDermott, the group's alcoholic radio operator. We see these characters survive the original script. We have our Dr. Logan, who is the main surgeon, and he's also a mad scientist.
Yes, who the cast of characters tend to call Frankenstein, which I absolutely love.
Yes. And we have Bub, who is played by Sherman Howard, and he's a captured zombie taught by Logan to engage passively in human behavior. And we'll get to Bub, because he's kind of interesting. But we open the movie with Sarah, with this, like, nightmare she has in her, like, room, and a calendar and all these arms bust through to like grab her, and it's really effective nightmare scene. And then we wake up and they're in a helicopter and they're doing the sweep for survivors, of which there are none. All there are shamblers and like a alligator in a bank, even though I'm pretty sure that wasn't an alligator, it was a crocodile, but I didn't go back and check.
I did also love, just as a side note, in the behind the scenes, they were talking about how apparently you don't train alligators. You just kind of let them loose. So there's this alligator coming out of a bank and the producer was like, and I'm going to walk this way.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just kind of let him slither down the steps. It's fine. It's fine.
No, it's you feed it chicken and you get out of its way.
Oh, yeah. I liked that opening scene, even though the zombies were still kind of blue.
Yes.
So blue.
They were less blue down in the caves.
They were. Mm-hmm. I think the cave makeup and special effects was a little bit more effective. Although I loved the zombie that had its lower jaw and tongue falling off in this scene.
Good. So good.
Fantastic.
That was a fantastic effect. So they do head back to base, which is a military silo underground. Boy, is it protected by the flimsiest of chain link fences, of which there are so many.
These are not the kind of zombies. They can't crawl or climb. When they hit a fence, they're like, well, we can only move forward.
It's already flimsy as they're pressing on it. Like we saw it in the opening scene. It was like you add one more person and that whole thing's coming down, man.
Bless their hearts, they filmed that scene. That scene actually took place in Sanibel Island, where Romero had a second house. So, like, they just, like, found a place with a chain link fence
and just pressed on it for a couple hours.
Which is just so funny to me.
I kind of love that.
That's actually kind of amazing.
But, you know, we really
Granted, they do imply that the zombies are excited by activity, right?
Oh,
so they're going to press up against the fence, but as soon as the team gets into the bunker and out of sight, then the zombies are going to be much less excited about getting inside the compound.
Yeah, they'll sort of calm down, which it becomes a trope in certain zombie properties, right? You know, they're attracted to sound, they're attracted to movement. And I do like that trope.
But we're not going to fill that helo.
You know, I really was expecting that helo to be Chekhov's empty gas can. But
also, I too was as well. I was like, oh no, they're not going to fill the helo in time. Oh no, and they're going to need to.
But luckily, even though we're not on good terms with them, the army guys do their job and fill it later at night. Well, thankfully.
Probably because somewhere in the back of their heads, they're thinking, I'm going to need to use this to get out.
I mean,
you know, like, I don't think that was them doing their jobs. That was them trying to keep themselves safe.
I mean, the fact that later on Rhodes is like, we're all going to get in the helo and we're going to fly off. Like, you know, he sent someone up there to take care of it.
That was for him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we do see Sarah. She's the strong one. Everyone's stressed out and falling apart, and she's not. She's trying to keep her mind focused on work, on trying to find a cure, on, you know, she spends a lot of the movie complaining about how no one's communicating. A lot of the movie.
Listen, when you're the only woman in a workplace,
it's not great.
Yeah, there was a lot.
You're gonna spend a lot of your time talking about how no one is effectively communicating.
There was a lot of relatable with Sarah, I think.
Yeah. I think we've all been Sarah at some point. But, you know, there is a lot of tension because they fly in and the commander of the base is dead. There's a fresh grave. And now that means Rhodes is now the commander. And Rhodes is probably 2 Red Bulls away from going completely homicidal. He is...
If that.
If even that.
Yeah.
The whole purpose of this location was that they were going to research this zombie apocalypse. And to do that, they need specimens. And to get specimens, they have to corral them and they have to collect them. And that is a dangerous job. And we see they have a sort of zombie corral within the limestone caves. And the view of these zombies coming out of the darkness, but then also they're hesitant. And that's where they're scared. Their learning starts coming into play.
Yeah.
The zombies are drawn to the sound. They're drawn to the lures that are given to them. but they know it's bad.
And they know they go in, they don't come out.
Exactly. And I love that. I love that so much. And that is a continual thing they play with in this movie, because this movie also plays a lot with the ethics of scientific inquiry and of experimentation. A lot. But again, like this is a small crew now of, I think it's like 12 military people at this point and 3 science people. And then you've got the radio operator and the helicopter guy. That's it. That's who we've got. Miguel himself has been awake for 24 hours, and no one seems to care except for Sarah. And a part of the reason no one seems to care is because they know her and Miguel are an item. So I guess they're being awful about that because...
Right. Well, they think that she's showing favoritism by caring about Miguel and no one else.
Yeah.
And they also don't care about Miguel because he's Hispanic.
Yes. There is a lot of levels of what's going on. And it's just like, instead of, trying to make sure everyone's on their best feet so nobody gets hurt, they continue to just wear him down, and it's going to bite them in the you-know-what.
Butts.
Yes. Anyway. So we're finally here. We're finally to one of my most hated tropes in zombie anything, where everyone in the army is a bunch of pigs and all rapists if you give them a chance. And
and there's only one woman, Nella.
And I've read that apocalyptic fiction where there's only one woman, and it's the worst one. It's in the top 5 of the worst apocalyptic fictions I've read, and I've only read up to like the 1930s. It's bad. But Rhodes,
this is a scary, scary place to be in. It's not a scary place because of the zombies.
No, that's the thing. Rhodes is a terrifying character because there is no reasoning with him. He has no concern for his own safety outside of what he deems as safe. And now he is the lord and master of this area, and he is not here for a reason. He has lost too many men. He doesn't want to die. And why would we ever keep doing what we're doing when we have no one to answer to? And what's the point anyway?
And the that beautiful cherry on top of needing to control the tiny fiefdom that you have. And I'm specifically referencing when he orders one of his guys to shoot Sarah if she doesn't sit down. And it's just like, that is ridiculous. And I remember thinking, if you're going to be the big man on campus, you need to be the one holding the gun, which in a way is less frightening than being like, and I have to order this guy to do it because I need to keep control of this situation.
Yeah.
Right.
And hold on to every single possible morsel of control that I have. And it's so gross because it's just like, you should never have had this kind of control, but everyone else is dead and the army still has rank, I guess. Even though we're not answering to anybody. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, I think it does. In a weird way, I think it does make sense because, we're not answering to anyone, but, the guys who are there are awful, but they do still feel obliged to rank. They never go, well, you know what? We don't have to listen to Rhodes. To hell with him. No, they fall in line to him because they've been trained to. They've been trained to. I know they don't have to listen to him, but they do because they're falling on what they know.
I know. And this is always where Miguel kind of breaks my heart because he's like the one dude who's just like, I just want to sleep. Can you guys just not for 5 seconds? All I want to do is go to bed. And just because for a second there, I was about to say, and they do all fall in line. And I mean, Miguel to some extent also does, but you definitely need at least one dude to be like, no. And we'll get to that.
But while all this machination is happening, we meet Dr. Logan or Frankenstein. And I love me a mad scientist, and boy, is he a mad scientist. And what I love is here is the movie where we start actually getting to how this wild zombie science in Romero movies works. He is here, dissecting, really vivisecting zombie bodies because they're still moving. Because you can remove everything but the brain, and the body still functions. Mm-hmm. We see that with a very effective practical effect.
Oh,
super effective.
The practical effects in this scene were amazing.
Yes. And Dr. Logan is very obsessed with the idea of figuring out not how to cure them, but how to control them. You know, making pets of them, how to domesticate them. And the way he says it so gleefully is actually very chilling. But it's also where I'm just like, oh, that's where Shaun of the Dead got its ending.
Yeah. It's definitely in there. And it's also in the, I feel like this has been not completely true of every Romero that's come before, but it's like the zombies can learn, you know. And also, which I'm sure you're going to bring this to Bub in a second, but this is also why I really love Bub, because what's the actor's name? Sherman?
Howard Sherman.
Howard Sherman. Sherman talks about how he had these long conversations with Romero about like how they wanted to portray Bub, and like Bub was kind of like the mascot on set also of like, you know, he's the nice zombie. But like they had these long conversations about like what would it mean to be like, yes, like you don't have to feed, like you get your meals brought to you and like you do these little tricks and things, but like animated flesh wouldn't act like, you know, a you know, mid-40s gentleman who knows everything, right? Like it would be like an infant just learning how to crawl, and like he just does such interesting things with his body and with his face that I really love. And
he even was bringing it down to, you know, a smart zombie is about as smart as a really dumb dog.
Exactly. Exactly. And I love that that's so easily portrayed. Like Sherman does such a good job, which actually...
Well, Sherman actually had a background ranging from Shakespeare to mime.
Yes.
Which, what a great person to bring on for this principal zombie.
No, if people look him up, I guarantee you will recognize him from something, because I couldn't recognize him in the movie because he has so much prosthetic and so much makeup on. I didn't realize who he was. So when I was watching the behind the scenes, I was like, oh my God, that was him. Wait, what? And like Bub, the real MVP of this film.
He truly is, for sure.
But we'll get there. I don't want to skip ahead.
Yeah. No, but just bringing it back to Dr. Cooper briefly in this scene, what's also revealed in this scene is
you mean Dr. Logan, because it's Cooper.
Dr. Logan.
Cooper is the guy who died.
Yes. Dr. Logan in this scene. Cooper was in my brain because it's revealed that Dr. Logan is actually experimenting on Major Cooper, who just died.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that Logan let the soldiers bury just a random other body because he really wanted a fresh zombie. So now not only are they corralling zombies, he's also experimenting on other soldiers who turn.
And we find out that's not all he's doing either. And like,
ooh, yes.
And we are absolutely, and Sarah knows, if the army people found out, they're dead.
Yep.
This is a secret that has to go to the grave.
Yes.
Side note, I can't get over how gory and delicious the special effects are in this scene. Just in general in this movie, they're so good. But like those are particularly ace.
Just
like the intestines falling out of the zombie who sits up halfway.
Yep.
And, oh, so good.
But
the brainstem for me.
When Logan approaches the one zombie with a Dremel drill and they flinch from the danger because they know that's coming for the brain. And that's that you can't mess with that.
Yep.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's so much more interesting than like fast zombies or zombies that can talk. Which we'll get to. Anyway, so So we're getting a picture of the sort of the secrets and lies and like the tensions of this small community trapped underground. Of course, Logan, crazy old Logan, is the only one who can roll up and at least calm Rhodes down long enough that Sarah doesn't get shot, pretty much.
Right. He can like talk circles around Rhodes.
Exactly.
Because it's clear that he's bringing a lot of knowledge to the table and he knows what he's doing.
Yes.
Well, and
he's also kind of tricked Rhodes into thinking that he is eventually going to be able to control these zombies.
Yes. I mean, there's that, but I get the feeling from Dr. Logan that he's just dealt with a lot of bureaucratic people before and he knows what to say. He has that level of scientist that is almost nihilistic to the point of like, the morals don't really matter as long as I get results, right? But he is such a person of understanding behavior because that's really what he's doing with these zombies. He's trying to understand their behavior. And every time I saw him interact with Rhodes, it was just like, oh, I know. I just have to talk calmly and smoothly and make my point. And eventually you will hear me. And if I don't get emotional, that like, you'll listen to me more. And this is fine.
Right.
And like, you don't affect me. And I loved his air of, what are you going to do? Shoot me?
There's actually been some writing about like how Logan really leans into a kind of earlier, especially 80s idea of psychology where it's like the reward and punishment system and it's very paternalistic. But also how like because he is the mad scientist, we are not there to think that, no, he's right and correct. It's actually kind of twisted and gross what he does. So I like that. But after this confrontation, you know, that's where Sarah starts to gravitate towards Bill and John because Miguel is, you know, continuing this kind of breakdown where he starts acting violently and aggressively towards her, even though she's trying to help him. And she eventually has to pretty much throw him out because she's trying to help him and he's rejecting her help. And there's only so much anyone can do.
That was a really tough scene.
It was a really tough scene. But, you know, she turns towards John and Bill, who are two outsiders, really. They're not military, technically. They're not scientists. They are there because they are the support figures. They are there to run the radio and fly the helicopter. They are vital, but they are outside of the point of command entirely.
Yeah,
literally and figuratively.
Yes, because they have their nice little trailer that they've set up, like a cozy
far away as they
movie
can.
set beach area, and they welcome Sarah in with our welcome to paradise.
It was beautiful.
Look, I can read queer into everything. You give me anything and I will read queer into it. But you can't look me in the eye and tell me that John from Jamaica got his cozy cable knit sweater from his Irish boyfriend. The kind of coolness they had towards Sarah at the beginning, it disappears within that scene. I think they are also looking for a connection to another human. And this is where we have the scene where they sit and they talk.
Yeah.
And you get the classic apocalyptic talk of John, the flyboy, pointing out, you know, in this cave are all these records of humanity. There are these records, there are these tapes, there are these books, there's everything. Trying to preserve a world that no longer exists. Why are we trying to preserve anything? Like, we should be getting out of here, finding an island, and living out the rest of our lives as happy as we can before we die.
Right.
I
love the switch in their personality because I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes sense that they wouldn't trust her right up front, right? They hadn't vetted her yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk about it here, Nella, but there is a slight stereotype that they do fall into a little bit with John, where he does come across a little bit like he's magic and he's a black man and he talks about like,
I would say like more like the mystical religious, like, you know, God's cursing us all and he's starting fresh and like, you know, this is a punishment.
He has mysticism answers for them.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, and he's like, he's the one to say that, where I'm just like, well, that's all right.
I feel like the Irish guy could have filled that just as well.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, I feel like the Irish dude could have brought in some Catholic stuff. I don't know. He does say Jesus, Mary, and Joseph a couple of times.
But yeah, like, so we start to see, them building that connection, which, spoilers, is going to end up saving them down the line.
Because of the communication.
Yes, because they communicate.
I really love, I know you were like, and they talk, but they talk honestly and directly. Like Sarah flat out is just like, I don't understand. Oh, what does she even say? She says something like,
she accuses them of not pulling their weight.
Yes.
Basically. Like she just doesn't understand why they're here.
Yeah. I love that it was like, John was like, say what you're going to say. Like safe space, just like say it. And they have this realistic conversation that only the end of the world could bring about, where it's just like, what's your role? What's your job? Are you actually fulfilling your, the resources to keep you here? And it's just a really interesting conversation. And I love his answer. Just as you said, it's like, why are we fighting to instill a world that is gone? Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
And his answer to her question is a question, which is, why am I here? Why are you here?
Right.
Like, come on. You're writing all of this down. You're doing all of this research. Why?
Where are you going to send it?
Enjoy yourself. Let's go to an island somewhere. Let's be safe and happy.
What book are you going to publish? What blog are you going to write? Like, who's going to read it, Sarah? Who is going to read all these notes
Who is going to read
you
it?
make?
Yeah. But yeah,
so Sarah just starts developing headaches, which I at first thought was a hangover, because the first time she goes and takes those pills is right after she's up all night drinking with Bill and John.
Same.
And instead just is part of her experience of living in this bunker with all of those men.
But then we get the scenes of Logan showing off Bub, where we have the toothbrush and the razor and the book Salem's Lot.
I love that.
Bub saluting the guy in command, Rhodes. And Logan making the point of, well, how are we supposed to set an example for them if we behave like barbarians ourselves? But we strongly set up that zombies can use tools, they can aim weapons. He even knows to check, and there's no bullets in the gun. I'm losing it. I'm losing my mind right now.
And for some reason, of all the people in that room, Bub chose to aim the gun at Rhodes.
I know, right?
So there's something that Bub knows here, and there's something that Bub is picking up on.
He knows Chekhov's gun. That's what he knows. He remembers that.
Like, when he puts the razor onto his face, he shaves off some skin.
Yeah.
And he knows to point a gun at Rhodes.
So good. But now here we are. We're at the inciting incident, where we're at the point where it all goes pear-shaped. We're at another zombie roundup, and Miguel drops the pole, and it breaks, actually. It's not even that he loses control of it. The strap breaks.
Yeah, the strap
This is after
breaks.
Sarah had explicitly told everyone Miguel should not be on shift right now. He should rest. And she was right. She was right.
But even the way the pole breaks, like if it had fallen from his hands, that'd be one thing. But the strap breaks. There's no controlling that. Either it's in good repair or it's not. And but of course Miguel gets blamed for it. And in the chaos, 2 guys are killed. Miguel is bitten. Sarah cuts off his arm and cauterizes it, to try and make sure he doesn't die of the zombie infection and then reanimate.
And a beautiful piece of special effects too.
Oh, so good. And although here's the thing though, I mean, good on you, Sarah, for being so fast as to cut his arm off. Thank God John's there to roll up with a tourniquet after the fact. Tourniquet first, then you chop off the arm. Simple people. There is an order of operations here when you're amputating.
I'm so glad they lit a torch on fire. Good job. Just gonna make a quick torch.
This is the moment where Sarah absolutely finally breaks down in front of other people.
Yes.
After Miguel has been his arm has been amputated and cauterized, and then she breaks down because the moment of absolute panic and danger has passed, and now I can break down in front of the 2 people who care about her the most and are not going to judge her for it, in front of John and Bill.
Team Minority.
Precisely. So they go to find some morphine, and then they find Logan's House of Horrors.
You're not wrong.
House of Horrors. Oh, Logan.
Yeah.
Like we knew he was shady and we knew he was up to no good, but it didn't become creepy to the same level until we got to the next scene.
But we all knew he had it in him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure did.
And this is also where we find out that what he's been feeding Bub and the other zombies is the fresh meat from the dead soldiers. And to be fair to Logan, to quote Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove, he ain't getting any deader.
Look, meat
But
is
that's
meat.
when Logan gets shot by Rhodes.
Yes. I was sad. It was so weird to be so sad to see Logan go. It was just because I just like, I don't know. I feel like in my heart of hearts, I wanted Logan to survive this madhouse somehow.
I think I wanted Logan to go out the way he wanted to, by zombie.
By zombie.
Yeah. I think that's why his death was disappointing, for lack of a better words. Like, I'm not upset that he as a character died. I'm upset that it was Rhodes who took him out.
Yeah.
I would,
You know?
I would echo that for sure.
Yeah. Now, meanwhile, while all this is happening, our Team Minority had come up with a very sensible plan. I like that we keep calling the Irishman Team Minority, but he's not.
What about Team Down and Out?
Team Down and Out.
We'll
there
do
we
that.
go.
Team Down and Out.
But they had, our Irishman came up with the plan. What if we just take the helicopter and get out of here? And I'm like, I'm with Bill on this. Now, John was going to give him 30 minutes. Go get what you can, and I'll meet you back. But of course, they get caught, and Bill and Sarah get put into the zombie pen. And John gets caught by Rhodes, and Rhodes is like, you're going to take us on the helicopter, Flyboy. And John's like, I'm not taking you anywhere. And then it becomes a war of attrition between Rhodes and John. And if you think you're going to break John, Rhodes, you've got you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
But of course, the soldiers start beating on John. And, if you were already waiting for these military people to die horribly, you got another reason to want it really badly. Because how dare you lay a finger on John?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
However, while in the zombie pen, Bill, hand to God, finds himself a shillelagh. God bless his heart. I lost my mind. I was so grateful. Get that man a shillelagh.
It was so good, too, to see him use it. So awesome.
So good. So good.
Also, as an additional side note, apparently on set, Romero was totally into everybody, like, bring me your ideas. You got a fun idea for, like, a way to die? Like, let's try it. Let's do it. Like, let's figure out how to kill those zombies. Let's make it interesting.
I love that.
I have, like, no bad ideas. Like, come to me and talk to me about anything you want. And apparently one of those ideas was the actor who played Bill was like, well, what if I just took like a shovel and just went whap, like right in a zombie's mouth and then chucked off the rest of his head. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And then they did
the
it.
eye is still blinking when it comes to a stop is so
Yes, like
good.
going back and forth.
Yes.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm.
What good, like the special effects in the last, I would say, third of this movie, like they're good throughout the whole film, but like the tearing apart of these soldiers is so visceral and so bloody and so gory and so it's good for people who are fine with gore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's exactly, it's over the top, but in a way that really, really, really works.
Yes.
Like, listen, did a zombie need to stick two of its fingers into someone's eye sockets bowling ball style and then pull the rest of their head off? No. Did I enjoy it? Yes.
You bet I did.
Anyway, so now while all this chaos is happening, Miguel, who is like morphine high, blood loss happy, and mad as hell and not going to take it anymore, goes on a revenge quest to commit suicide by zombie.
It took them so long to chop off, cauterize, and tourniquet his arm. I'm pretty sure he was going to turn anyway.
Well, he's just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm out of here. I commit my body to the sea of zombies. And he lets them in. And they, of course, tear him apart, but they get in. They get in down the elevator, and they run amok. And it is incredibly satisfying to see all the military people get it. Steele gets, like, his throat ripped out and ends up committing suicide. I have never cackled harder at a zombie killing a person than Bub's relentlessly pursuing Rhodes for killing his daddy, Dr. Logan. I love when Bob sarcastically salutes. I've never loved a zombie more in my life. Bub for president.
So sorry, another quick aside. Sherman went to see this in a theater in Times Square. And while he was watching it, at some point he noticed the audience obviously rooting for Bub. And by the end of it, they are chanting, Bub, 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 Bub. And I'm like, to be that actor surrounded by all that, and he was just like, it was great. It was great.
You know, there's a great quote from Romero where they're like, so are zombies like an allegory? Like, are zombies just what they are? And what I loved about him talking about it is that, and it comes, he was talking about it where, you know, people are always overanalyzing in these movies, you know, in the Night of the Living Dead. Sometimes a cigar
is just a cigar.
Exactly. Like in Night of the Living Dead, they were like, oh, you know, zombies are obviously represent Nixon's silent majority. And he's like, no, the zombies are just zombies. The allegory is about humans and how they react. And he makes a point of, you know, I try to respect and sympathize with the zombies as much as possible, actually. And I think it really shows with Bub. And with the zombies in this, because you see them flinch, you see them show fear, you see them hesitate. And even from the beginning, though, we see the ghouls back when they were just the ghouls using tools, being drawn to things that are familiar to them. And, you know, even though they're filled with this insatiable drive forward towards meat. But yeah, it's Bub. Bub is the real MVP, and we love him. Good news, everyone. Bill, John, and Sarah get it they climb up the silo ladder to the surface, and they're in the elevator.
Gosh. Everything leading up to that, including John catching up with Bill and Sarah. I mean, like, him going through the tunnels, and there was so much tension in that scene because every time he headshots a zombie, you know that he needs to do that, but also now more zombies are coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they spread it out between, like, intercut between 4 different scenes where he's getting closer and closer to them, and you don't know if he's going to make it.
So good.
Although I love when they're climbing up the ladder, you know, the guys drop the sort of things that are holding them back, you know, like John drops the empty gun. Bill drops the empty flask from whiskey.
Empty flask.
Yeah, he does.
We don't need this where we're going.
And John almost doesn't make it. A zombie grabs him around the ankle.
No. But they make it.
We get that last jolt of, like, is it part dream? Is it part reality? Because Sarah has this jolt awake.
It's a really abrupt cut where this zombie arm comes out of the helicopter, like it was hiding in there waiting for her, but then she wakes up on a beach. And they did escape. They're on a tropical island, and the boys are fishing. And will they survive for very long? Who knows? But they made it.
I love that last scene. I actually went back and watched it again to just note what everyone was doing.
I know.
Because Sarah wakes up and she's on the beach and she looks around, and you're right. John is fishing. What is Billy doing? Billy is feeding the seagulls, is what Billy is doing.
That's right.
Of course he is.
Just living our best lives.
It's beautiful.
And that's how it ends. So that movie was released in August of 1985. And it kind of got panned. The reviews weren't great. It was just too dour. It was too gruesome for the reviews at the time. And also, it didn't have a wide release at first. It had a limited release, and it was bringing in slow but steady returns. And just as it was about to go for a wide release, it got completely blindsided by a very surprising rival that came out of left field and had a very similar origin story. And that is Return of the Living Dead. And Return of the Living Dead, which came out, I believe, 2 months after Dawn of the Dead was released, was, okay, whew, we're going to try and run through this one really quick. John Russo was one of the co-writers of Night of the Living Dead with George Romero. And the way they sort of parted ways professionally was that John Russo would have the rights to anything using Living Dead. And then George Romero, though, would be able to sort of take the concepts he wanted to continue his own zombie series. And that's why he moves to more of the dead in the title instead of Living Dead. And Russo had written a novel called Return of the Living Dead, but he didn't write the screenplay for Return of the Living Dead for this movie. It was actually written and directed by Dan O'Bannon, and this was his directorial debut. He has more screenwriting credits under his belt. Like, for example, he wrote Total Recall. He would later go on to help with Heavy Metal. Romero actually seems to be very upset for what they did to Russo's concept. Like they really did my friend dirty is pretty much the sense you get. He sort of came around on the movie eventually, but it's like, but this isn't my friend's story. So there you are.
It's firmly rooted in 80s camp ridiculousness.
That's
the film.
The thing. Day of the Dead is so grim. It's so adult. It's so serious. It doesn't even really have the camp that Dawn of the Dead had. And then you have Return of the Living Dead open up, and it is a comedy horror. It is described as a mordant punk comedy. It is specifically infamous for actually introducing the concept that zombies just want to eat brains. And there's this great Romero quote from a Vanity Fair article that the article itself was pretty bad. The questions were terrible. But what he says is, first of all, why does everyone say that zombies eat brains? I've never had a zombie eat a brain. I don't know where that comes from. Who says zombie eats brains? Whenever I sign autographs, they always ask me, write, eat brains. I don't understand what that means. I've never had a zombie eat a brain, but it's become this landmark thing. And it's from this movie.
He's not wrong. I mean,
I was going to say, he's not wrong. I've only seen 3 of these movies, but in none of these 3 movies did the zombies eat brains.
I know, they want to eat flesh. It's also the first time we show zombies running. Mm-hmm. Zombies can talk, not just like kind of talk, like they can kind of remember language. No, they talk. There's a lot happening with these zombies. They can also talk, can't be killed.
Plan. They can plan. They can connect. Like the horrifying thing for me was the first time we see this, there's a couple of paramedics who get jumped by these zombies. First of all, a zombie just flat out opens the passenger door and runs across to get him in the driver's seat, which I was not prepared for. It was fast. It was violent. And then the guy is sitting there eating some brains like a 3-year-old. But he hears over the radio in the paramedic van, they're like, hey, you need to respond to our, like, hey, what's going on? Do you need, like, assistance? What's going on with that call? Is everything okay? And the zombie stands up, walks over to the radio, takes it, presses the button, and says, send more paramedics.
Yeah.
But
then for me, like, this is a big con about the movie to me, because then they're not zombies. Like, I feel the same level of terror if I pass by, like, an alt-right gathering. They're just people. These are just people who want to kill me. I don't know what to tell you, except they're cannibals. Like, that's terrifying, but in a different way. Like, to me, they're not zombies. I don't know what to tell you.
I think that's a fair point. Look, like, considering Romero zombies, which we have seen many facets of at this point, I think it took the Romero zombies and, like, turned it up to 11 and gave them a very specific want and need. In the film, we do find out that, like, zombies feel the pain of rotting and the pain of death every second they exist. And so the eating of brains is a way to quell that and to actually improve. Like, I think this is a little bit iZombie, personally. I think it's like unspoken in the thing that like the more brains they eat, the more intelligent they get.
Well, even so, like, we have the one example of like the half zombie woman that they strap down to like the table, where when she first comes through the window, she is just a skeleton, really, with hair on her. But then after she actually eats the guy and they drag her off, she fills out. She looks better.
Yeah. No, the mortician is like, look at her. She's better, which is ridiculous because she's basically a brains. Although I did not need zombie breasts in my life. Thank you, movie.
They sure gave us that.
They sure gave us so many zombie breasts.
Well, you remember how in Night of the Living Dead we had the one naked woman? Like, what if we had a more 80s Scream Queen reason for having just breasts on screen?
There was
Hear me out.
It was so much more artistic in Night of the Living Dead. Like, look, I'm not going to sit here as somebody who actually really enjoys Return of the Living Dead. Like, genuinely, I think it's a fun romp. I enjoyed it. It had a lot of visual stuff that will scarred me for life, I'm sure, as a child. But like, I watch it now and I'm like, wow, is this not an artfully done film?
Yeah. Just to catch Danielle up, because she didn't get to watch it with us, but what happens is there is a medical supplier warehouse owner. He has 2 employees. One of them's being trained on the job, and the other one's like, oh, you know that movie, Night of the Living Dead? Oh, it was actually all true that happened, but they had to change the details of it because it was actually happened at like a hospital. This army gas got out, and the dead started rising from the dead, and we have the canisters.
So they directly... So that movie exists in the universe of this movie.
And it's
all
true, Danielle.
Yes. Before the movie starts, there is a paragraph on the screen of everything you are about to see is true events, based on true events. It's amazing.
It's one of those.
This is kind of like in Day of the Dead when Rhodes says, and all the shopping malls are closed. And you're like, aha.
Exactly.
But so these 2 employees, they go to like, he goes to show off the canister in the basement. Oh no, this is good military tech. They bang on them. Of course, one breaks open. All this gas releases. They get hit in the face with the gas. The gas gets out. It starts bringing all the dead specimens in this medical supply warehouse to life. There are amazing gags.
Say it properly, Nella. You need a med supply.
You need a med supply.
You need a UNEEDA medical supply. You need a medical supply.
There are some great gross bits in this scene where like a half dog comes back to life. Pinned butterflies on a board are flapping against the pins. And the other thing about the dead in this movie is a headshot doesn't kill them. Nothing kills them, actually, but fire. They cut up a body, and all the bits keep wiggling. And I've also read this apocalyptic fiction, and it was terrible. It was the worst apocalypse ever. Top 5 worst apocalypses. Where no one can die. And it's a complete tonal difference from Day of the Dead. Also in this movie, we have a roving gang of punks who are just looking to like have a good time.
Inclusive punks, because they're
very inclusive punks.
We have 2 actual punks. We have like a nerd who's listened to too much 80s pop and wearing like a suit that like the shoulder pads are way too wide. We have like the jazzercise girl with the too much neon and the frizzy hair. Like, and we have the Sandy from Grease who is just totally accepted by this group of people, even though she's like a button up cardigan and it's like you took the Breakfast Club and like stirred them around in a smoothie, but they were all cool with it. Like,
yeah. I'm like fascinated by this friend group,
that kind
truly.
Of punks.
And
not the punks on roller skates.
Absolutely not. And the one woman who was like a casting reject from Cats, because I swear she was just jellicle the entire film. She was all cat all the time.
I mean, even one of the punks in the group is played by, the Scream Queen, Linnea Quigley. And like, she sure goes full, like, well, all right, to be fair, she was wearing a flesh-covered G-string, It looked very full frontal.
Yeah. It was there was a lot of nude in this movie.
Here's how the conceit happens. So they have this like still moving dead body that they have to get rid of because, you know, this will shut down the business if anyone finds out. So they go to the owner's buddy who happens to be a mortician who has a crematorium. And this guy, Ernie, is heavily implied to be an expat Nazi in hiding. Heavily implied.
It's not subtle. It's
very, like, between the gun he has and the trench coat he has, and I'm pretty sure that's a picture of Eva Braun on his bulletin board in the background.
And the music he listens to. And
the German he drops.
The German he drops. Yeah, he is, like, it's so weird because it's this throwaway characteristic about him and, like, doesn't matter to the plot. And I'm like, no, I wanted this to matter.
He's kind of doing his best to try to keep people alive. So he's kind of heroic in it, which is deeply uncomfortable. Yeah, it's not great.
It's my only complaint about this movie is, like, if you had that, you should have done something with it instead of just made him an expat Nazi when it's just like, but you didn't have to do that. You really didn't have to do that. None of that makes sense. But so they cremate the moving bits. Meanwhile, Frank and Freddie are slowly getting sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And they call the paramedics to help them out. The paramedics come and they have the death becomes her moment. Like, these poor paramedics are just like, it's an anomaly. You're not dead. You're not dead. You're talking to me. So, you know, it's a real thinker.
Well, this is happening. The problem with crematoriums is that smoke goes up, and in the smoke is the gas from the dead body, which then becomes zombie rain, which then comes down on the conveniently located cemetery right next door, which then reanimates all of the dead in the cemetery, even the skeletons. Everybody comes back.
Spores.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? For the 80s, I feel like, you know, you could easily make this like a nuclear waste like allegory because you can't just get rid of it. There's nothing you do to get rid of it. It's just always going to be there. You could try burning it to stop it, but that only spreads it further.
I like that.
Yeah. No, and that's 100% how this reads, right? Like it could have been a nuclear disaster. It could have been the chemical waste that they dumped into a lake, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you know, all these punks and all these people on this one night are suddenly surrounded by these fast, ravenous, intelligent zombies. As the zombies themselves call more paramedics and more cops, they get more food, they spread out further. Finally, you know, the survivors manage to get the number off the side of the original container that started this all. They call the military. And, of course, what does that lead to? But the military nuking the town of Louisville, Kentucky, where this takes place. Oh. However, of course, as the movie ends with the military being like, don't worry, we nuked it. It's all taken care of. We see the smoke rising as the rain starts falling down again.
Say,
and more dead rise.
If we're talking about a spore smoke situation, that wouldn't solve the problem.
Yeah. And
much like how wiping out one island wouldn't cure the zombie apocalypse across an entire planet.
Yeah.
Bringing it all back.
You know,
it was a nice callback. I liked it.
About this movie is that the cascading bad decisions made to protect the shady medical supply business is chef's kiss. Because, like, instead of just, like, calling the military number to begin with, they try to hide the evidence, which makes things worse. I love the sort of big Resident Evil 2 vibes of them just trying to nuke the problem.
Yes.
Even though I know Resident Evil 2 was inspired by, like, or the Resident Evil series was really inspired by Dawn of the Dead and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and a game called Sweet Home. There was still something about the ending that was just like, that's Resident Evil 2. You have to escape Raccoon City. I mean, and the things I don't like is that these didn't feel like zombies to me. You know, they're able to talk without lips or diaphragms and like full sentences. Like they run, they're fast zombies, like they're scary. But to me, it's not the same kind of terror. And I think Romero put it best when he says, because he's been asked about, you know, what's fast zombies? What's that about? He felt it was about video games because zombies always move fast in video games because it's about hand-eye coordination, and it's more challenging. And then filmmakers see that and they have to like play catch up to that as well. And, you know, Romero says, my zombies, my guys, they will never run. They never have and never will. They're lumbering oafs that are just easy to dispose of unless you make a mistake. Those are the rules and I'll stick with what I got. And I like that rule because it's the terror of persistent hunting.
Yeah.
Nothing is going to stop a zombie. You are the one who has to sleep and eat and rest, and they don't.
Yeah.
Yes. And the terror of your own mistakes catching up with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's the I think I mentioned this to you, Nella, a couple of weeks ago, actually, where it's like how you brace your back against a wall and you like sit on nothing, and you can do that and it's easy at first. And then before you know it, it's the most difficult thing you're doing. And then you trip and you fall over. And I love the idea that it's like, no, it's about consistency and it's about plan in place and it's about safety. And then you rinse and repeat and you rinse and repeat. But like, obviously we're human and inevitably something's going to screw all of that up.
But
don't we know it?
Anyway, the thing about Return of the Living Dead is that it's described as giving 80s audiences what they wanted, good, sick fun. And it was far more successful than Day of the Dead. But there was some annoyance on Romero's part because people kept mistaking Return of the Living Dead for
a Romero
movies.
Movie. Yeah.
They thought it was a Romero movie, and it wasn't. And there's actually this really kind of sweet quote where he says, "It was all a dirty pool, and I never want to get into anything like that again. Jack Russo, and I were trying to preserve our friendship during it all, and it got crazy. I think he was screwed as well as everyone else. The film is his in title only. It's a send-up, which is exactly what I worried it would be. It damages your ability to do it straight."
I mean, I get a lot of deep feels about World War Z, the book, versus World War Z, the movie. So, like, yeah, feel, Romero. Yeah, feel.
Big yeah, feel.
I mean, I think, so, like, I mean, and I think I've already said this, but I do really enjoy Return of the Living Dead. But I enjoy it in a very different way than I enjoy any Romero film. Because I agree with you. Like, these zombies are not the same zombies. This horror is not the same. This isn't, like, it's not really about, like, yes, it's about people making mistakes, but it's also about, like, and yes, it's about hubris, but there's something so base level about it that, like, you just don't, there was never going to be anyone thinking clearly, which, by the way, I do think it's hilarious because I had been talking about a zombie movie that I couldn't actually remember like a couple of weeks. No, I think it was actually right after we watched Day of the Dead, where I was like,
probably,
we should watch. There's a zombie movie and it's hilarious. And it's like, it's basically slapstick and it's ridiculous camp. And all I could remember was that there were two of them and they were sequels of each other. And in one of them, one of the characters is chasing his girlfriend saying, "I can smell your brains. They're so rich and so spicy." And that's all I could remember. And I was like, Nella, I need to show you this because it's ridiculous. It's such a ridiculous zombie movie.
She went on such a YouTube deep dive to find and she found it. It's actually from Night of the Living Dead 2.
Yeah, it's from Return of the Living Dead 2. It's this movie. So this movie pulled an Evil Dead, basically. It had the first movie, it had a whole plot, the whole plot happens, and we assume the world is over, right? The second movie literally just restarts the whole thing. Same actors playing different roles, and the whole thing happens again. Return of the Living Dead 2 is essentially the same film with a slightly different plot. And it's hilarious to me because it's just like, well, we did this already. We've already done it. But for some reason, the second one is even more ridiculous because, again, we have that spicy line. Like, we do have the same actor chasing the same character essentially chasing after his girlfriend. He's like, I can smell your brains and I love you, but let me eat your brains. And like, she runs up into an attic to get away from him. But it's like, nowhere near. Your brains are so rich, so spicy. And I'm just like, I went on a deep dive on YouTube just to show you the scene because honestly, I don't think it's worth showing you the entire film because again, it's the same movie, just again.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. The only other funny part of the Return of the Living Dead 2 is where these two actors playing different guys who I think they're like grave robbers or something, or they're grave diggers, whatever. They still work in a cemetery instead of a medical supply store. But like when they start to feel sick because of whatever gas has actually come out into the world, they kind of turn to each other and like, I don't feel well. It feels kind of familiar. I don't know, man. Like, they knew what they were doing. They knew they were making this ridiculous film. And that's why I'm like, I will never confuse this with the Romero movies, because at least the Romero movies are almost high art, even when they get campy. Like, there's something really beautiful about everything in the cinematography and in the writing and in the understand. If Romero had a dude who was an expat Nazi, who would have done something about that? Flip every table, which actually I think I stole that from Nella because she was like, this is how you know it's not Romero. Because she was just like, Romero would have done something with an expat Nazi. I don't know what's happening.
That's Day of the Dead and the finale of our zombie movie night with Day of the Dead and just a little touch on Return of the Living Dead. Two very different movies from, branching from the same genitor, progenitor, I don't know. I'm tired. But before we go, any last thoughts about what we've seen so far? I have one note to add. So in that scene where Rhodes gets ripped apart in Day of the Dead, like at the very end, and it's very satisfying, and he's screaming like, choke on it. So those entrails that they used for the fake half of the body to be ripped apart, they got them about, beforehand, and they were trying to keep them in a cooler, in a refrigerator, keep them cold, and it kind of got unplugged, so they got kind of rancid. So they had to plug up the noses, and I'm like, instead of getting new ones, they just put wax up everyone's noses, except for the guy who played Rhodes, and he was he almost threw up. It was so disgusting. Yeah.
What an amazing
just
performance.
The entrails used in that scene?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, as I was watching the scenes leading up to that, where you actually start seeing the zombies
eating
chomping
stuff
on people, all I could think about is what you were saying during our last podcast episode about people getting very excited about eating human body parts.
And mind you, in those scenes, that would have been all Pittsburgh people who were just jazzed to be cast as a zombie in a Romero movie. And I'm just like, they make it special.
I could tell
in
they were
Pittsburgh.
jazzed. I could tell they were jazzed about chewing on these entrails.
Well, now, to be fair, the ones that actually went into their mouths were like turkey. They didn't actually, this time they actually got them proper food. I think my moment was, oh no, I had it. Danielle, do you have one while I try to remember mine?
I don't have a specific moment. I have a couple. I love that they had some zombies dressed up as a bride, a clown, a child football player.
Oh God, I forgot about that. That's right.
I have that I love Sarah. I love Sarah as a character, and I love that she was just so beat down by the bureaucracy and the people around her. I think that's part of the reason I loved her movie so much. And I'm so thankful that they all ended up happy and on a beach.
Yes, for sure.
As opposed to dying. I hope that the reason I love this movie isn't just that it actually did have the happy ending, unlike the first of the movies we saw. But I think that might be part of it.
Probably. I mean,
I have a handful of quick anecdotes, which I also picked up from that thing. The woman who played Sarah is actually a generational Romero actor because her father was in Night of the Living Dead.
nice.
And I think he was one of the newscasters. When everybody got sick on set, they called a doctor and like 39 people were lined up and they were handing out, in quotes, handing out vitamin B like candy. And I was like, oh boy.
Oh, no.
Is that what happens when you spend hours stuck in a tunnel that is somehow 55 degrees and humid?
They were
I can't
all
even comprehend
sick.
what that means.
At some point, the woman who played Sarah was like, so I had 104-degree fever, so I was a little punchy.
Oh, no.
They were all very sick. And then I think just I love Sarah to bits. Sarah's, I think, my favorite character in the whole thing. And she has such a strength that you just, you love to see in an 80s thing. And just like, even the actress who played her was like, I'm not anywhere near as brave as Sarah is. She was great. And like for this to be my first film role and to be the lead was amazing.
She was so amazing. I love Sarah in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's it. I think we've made it. We survived.
We survived. We've survived the zombie movie.
Well, so that, look, are we going to come back with Land of the Dead? Who can say?
Hey, listen, we don't have to make a podcast episode about it, but I will watch it with both of you now that I've heard you talk about it.
Well, I'm going to keep that in mind. Let's just say. On that note, thank you for joining with us on our movie night. Who knows if we do another one before we come back with the Apocalist, but just stay tuned. And where can everyone find you two in the future?
That's your.
Are you taking it this time,
No,
Joy?
that's
No,
your job, Danielle.
Okay, well, you can check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook. You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/BachPod.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, do we have a question before we leave in the fine tradition of Binge O'Clock instead of the Apocalist?
Yes. Joy, would you like to read the question? Otherwise, I have it.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Our question for you is, what is your favorite zombie origin story?
Excellent. Yeah. Tweet it at us. Drop it on the Patreon. Let us know. Personally, I'm pretty fond of like zombie by fungus. That's one of my favorites nowadays. Love them spores. Terrifying.
Love them spores. I'm not upset by space radiation either. I kind of enjoy that.
It's a classic. Pyron, that's where my heart lies right now.
Fair. I think mine is just the random unknown of like, and then suddenly the dead come back. Like there's a bunch of stories where it's like, you've been dead for 100 years. We don't know why you're back, but welcome, I guess. You doing okay?
Well,
rhyme or reason.
Well, so send us what your favorite is and see you next time, even if it is the end of the world.
And there's no one at all under the stars, the sun, the moon. Now it's ashes in my heart. I burned it all because of you. I burned it all because of you.
Our cover art is by Michael Vincent Bramley. Our theme music is by Robert Prine. Audio editing by Crutch Phrase Studio.
You can find us on Twitter at ApocalyptC, or you can email us at apocalyptbookclub@gmail.com.